Rare pregnant Mustang mare gives birth to a special baby. Minutes later, something shocking happened. Tom, it's pure white. Ember's foal. It's a miracle. Sarah's breathless voice crackled over the radio from her observation point. You need to get to Valley 3 now. A white Mustang. I'm on my way, Tom replied, the excitement clear in his voice. But only moments later, as the mare Ember cried out and strained again, Sarah was back on, her voice now a frantic whisper of disbelief. Tom, is she having another one? Oh my God, twins, she's had twins. Don't miss the incredible full story of this rare Mustang birth and the shocking events that followed. Subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and listen now to find out what happened to Ember and her special foals. The world tore itself apart with a sound like mountains grinding to bone. One moment, there was the fragile miracle of new life, the steam of birth rising in the crisp Nevada dawn, the air thick with the coppery scent of exertion and the sweet, milky aroma of the newborn. The next, the earth bucked like a spurred stallion. Alex Kane, tucked into the craggy embrace of an outcrop a respectful 200 yards away, felt the granite teeth of the ravine chatter against his spine. His camera, a lifeline to his solitary existence, leaped from his grip, bouncing sickeningly against the rocks. He barely registered its loss. His gaze was fixed, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs on the tableau below. The mare, a magnificent creature he'd tracked for 3 seasons. Her coat, the color of desert twilight, was on her feet, a statue of terror, her foal impossibly small, legs splayed in its first wobbly attempt to conquer gravity, was a pale smudge against the ochre earth. They had been nuzzling, a tender moment of recognition, the ancient bond forged anew. Then the ground had convulsed, a jagged crack, a dark, hungry mouth, zipped across the narrow clearing where the mare had chosen to give birth. It wasn't a chasm, not yet, but it was wide enough, deep enough to be a death trap for something so new and unsteady. Dust plumed thick and choking, momentarily obscuring the scene. The mare screamed, a sound Alex had never heard from her, a raw, primal shriek that clawed at his insides. When the dust settled a fraction, the sight that greeted him squeezed the air from his lungs. The foal was on the wrong side of the fissure. It bleated, a thin, terrified cry, teetering on the very edge. The mare, frantic, paced the opposite lip, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his own. She whinnied, a desperate call, stomping her hooves, the ground still trembling with violent aftershocks. Another section of the cliff face above them, loosened by the initial quake, groaned ominously. A shower of pebbles cascaded down, then larger rocks, one the size of a horse's head, thudded into the earth perilously close to the panicked mare. She shied, nearly stumbling into the newly formed crack herself. The foal, startled by the falling debris and its mother's desperate movements, took a clumsy step back. Its spindly hind legs slipped. For a horrifying second, it dangled, its tiny body scrabbling for purchase on the crumbling edge before it vanished into the shadowed crevice. The mare's answering cry was a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, a sound that would haunt Alex's nightmares for years to come. He was already moving, a desperate, unthinking scramble down the treacherous slope. The word no, a silent scream in his own throat. Part 2. Context and inciting incident. 800 words. Alex Kane had lived his life through a lens. finding solace and meaning in the silent, unyielding landscapes of the American West and the wild creatures that roamed them. For the past 5 years, his focus, his obsession, had been the Mustang herds of the Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area and its surrounding, less visited wildernesses. He wasn't a conservation officer, not officially, nor a scientist with grants and theses. He was a wildlife photographer, but more than that, he was a chronicler, a silent guardian who believed the stories held within the wild were vital. The mare he called Stardust was legendary among the few who knew these remote canyons intimately. She wasn't the lead mare of a large band, but a solitary wanderer, occasionally associating with a bachelor stallion or a small group, but mostly keeping to herself. Her coat, a deep, dusty gray, seemed to shimmer in certain lights, earning her the name. She was wily, almost preternaturally aware, and had evaded close observation for years. This was her third known foal, and Alex had a strong intuition. This pregnancy was different. She was older, carrying the foal through a harsh late winter, and her choice of this secluded, almost hidden, box canyon for birthing was unusual. It was sheltered, yes, but also perilously tight if trouble arose. He'd been tracking her carefully for weeks, his presence a whisper on the wind. He used no blinds, just his knowledge of the terrain, the wind direction, and an almost meditative patience. He ate little, slept less, his senses alive to the rhythm of the wild. He knew her patterns, her preferred grazing spots, the subtle shifts in her gait that signaled the approaching birth. The birth itself, just before the earthquake shattered the morning's peace, had been a profoundly moving event. Stardust had labored with a quiet fortitude, her breath misting in the cool air. And then the foal had arrived. A filly, he thought, though it was too soon to be certain. What made her instantly special in Alex's logbook, even before the catastrophe, were two things. Firstly, her coat was a startlingly pale cream, almost white, a stark contrast to Stardust's dusky gray, making her exceptionally conspicuous. Secondly, as she'd struggled to her feet, Alex, through his powerful telephoto lens, had noticed a distinct, though not debilitating, favoring of her left foreleg, a slight twist, perhaps, or a momentary weakness. In the unforgiving calculus of the wild, any imperfection could be a death sentence. He'd been jotting down notes, his heart swelling with a mixture of awe and concern. When the first tremor hit, his professional detachment, the bedrock of his ethics as a wildlife photographer, observe, never interfere, had been vaporized by the mare's scream and the foal's terrifying disappearance. Now, scrambling down the unstable slope, his earlier concerns about the foal's pale coat and tender leg were eclipsed by a far more immediate crisis. The ground was still shuddering with minor aftershocks. Stardust was a frantic silhouette against the dust-filled sky, circling the fissure, her head low, whickering piteously. The air smelled of pulverized rock and raw fear. This was no longer about observation. This was about life and death, a life that had barely begun. The inciting incident wasn't a choice made in calm deliberation. It was a visceral, instinctive reaction. Alex Kane, the man who lived to watch, was compelled to act. His initial goal, raw and unformed, surged through him: get to the foal, save it. The unspoken corollary was clear: he might have to save the mare from her own grief-stricken recklessness too. The rules of engagement had been irrevocably, terrifyingly rewritten, by the trembling earth. He reached the floor of the small canyon, his boots skidding on loose scree, his eyes already scanning for the point where the foal had fallen. The fissure wasn't a bottomless abyss, but a jagged, V-shaped crack, perhaps 8 feet deep at its center, narrowing at the ends. It was choked with fresh debris, rocks, clods of earth, and splintered roots from a tenacious juniper that had been ripped from the canyon wall. The foal's faint, distressed bleating, a thin thread of sound, guided Alex to a section where the opening was slightly wider. He peered down, his heart sinking. The little filly was wedged, her pale body a stark contrast to the dark soil and rock. She was alive, her tiny ribs heaving, but one of her fragile forelegs was bent at an unnatural angle beneath her, trapped by a dislodged slab of sandstone. Her eyes, wide and dark, were pools of terror. Above, Stardust was going frantic. She lunged towards the edge of the crack, then back, her breath coming in ragged snorts. Alex knew that if he tried to approach the foal directly with the mare in this state, she might injure herself or him, or inadvertently send more debris raining down. "Easy, girl, easy," Alex murmured, his voice low and calm, though his pulse was racing. He needed to think, to assess. The first complication was Stardust herself. Her maternal instinct, now a raging force of panic, made her unpredictable. He quickly scanned his surroundings. His backpack, containing his emergency kit, water, and some high-energy bars, was still up on the outcrop where he'd left it with his main camera. He'd scrambled down with nothing but the clothes on his back and the small multi-tool on his belt. Another complication limited resources. A fresh tremor, weaker this time but still unsettling, shivered through the ground. A trickle of loose dirt cascaded into the fissure, some of it landing on the foal. She cried out again, a sound that spurred Alex into a riskier assessment. He had to get a closer look to see if he could even reach her, let alone free her. He chose a section of the fissure slightly away from where the foal was trapped, where the lip seemed more stable. Slowly, deliberately, he began to lower himself into the crack, testing each handhold and foothold. The rock was friable, crumbling easily. This was dangerous. Stardust saw him and let out a furious snort, half charge, half warning. She stopped short of the edge, torn between her fear of him and her desperate need to get to her foal. "I'm trying to help her." "Stardust," Alex said, his voice even. He doubted she understood the words, but perhaps the tone. "Just stay calm." He managed to get down about 4 feet, the narrowness of the crack pressing against his back and chest. From this angle, he could see the foal more clearly. The sandstone slab pinning her leg was substantial, perhaps 50 or 60 pounds, too heavy to lift from this awkward position and potentially unstable. If he shifted it the wrong way, it could crush her leg further or trap her more severely. The foal's initial struggle had subsided to exhausted shivers. Her pale coat was now smudged with dirt, her breathing shallow. Time was critical. Even if he could free her, shock and exposure were rapidly becoming as dangerous as the physical entrapment. And then came the coyotes. He heard them first, a distant yipping. Then closer, the unmistakable opportunistic chorus of a pack that had scented vulnerability. The earthquake would have unsettled all wildlife in the area, and a trapped newborn was an open invitation. Stardust heard them too. Her head snapped up, ears swiveling, her fear now compounded by a new, ancient dread. She let out a piercing alarm call, a clear warning that also pinpointed her location and that of her helpless foal to any predator within earshot. Alex swore under his breath. This escalated things exponentially. He had to get the foal out, now. He tried to dislodge some of the smaller rocks around the main slab, hoping to create some wiggle room. His fingers, raw and scraped, fumbled with the cold stone. Each movement risked further collapse. Dust filled his nostrils, his throat. Suddenly, a voice from above startled him. "Kane, Alex Kane, what in the blazes are you doing down there?" He looked up. Silhouetted against the bright morning sky was a man in the uniform of a Bureau of Land Management ranger, older, weathered, with a no-nonsense set to his jaw. Ranger Davies. Alex knew him, not well, but they'd had a few terse conversations about buffer zones and responsible wildlife viewing in the past. Davies was not known for his warm and fuzzy approach to amateur naturalists. "Davies," Alex called out, relief and apprehension mixing in his voice. "Thank God, there's a foal trap down here, newborn, mares up top, and we've got coyotes moving in." Davies peered over the edge, his expression grim. "I felt the tremor from 10 miles out. Figured I'd check the known birthing areas. Didn't expect to find you excavating one." He paused, taking in the scene, the frantic mare, the half-buried Alex, the faint cries of the foal. "How bad is it?" "Legs pinned by a rock slab." Alex grunted, straining again. "I can't shift it alone from this position. And if I don't, those coyotes..." Davies was already unclipping a sturdy rope from his saddle. "Hold tight. Kane, don't be a hero and bring the whole damn wall down on yourself. I'll get my kit, an ally, a reluctant one perhaps, but an equipped and experienced one." The stakes were still sky high, but the odds, Alex felt, had just shifted ever so slightly, from impossible to merely improbable. The rising action was now a desperate race against multiple converging threats. Ranger Davies was efficient, his movements economical despite the urgency. He secured the rope to a solid-looking outcrop, then expertly rappelled into the fissure a few feet away from Alex, his sturdy boots finding purchase where Alex's had struggled. He carried a small, tough-looking pry bar and a compact first aid kit. "All right, Kane," Davis said, his voice all business as he assessed the trapped foal. "Let's see what we're dealing with." He examined the sandstone slab, testing its edges gently. The foal, sensing new movement, let out another weak bleat. Stardust, above, whinnied anxiously, her hooves drumming the earth near the edge. "Easy, Mama," Davies murmured, not looking up. "We're on it." He glanced at Alex. "Coyotes still out there?" Alex listened. The yipping was closer now, more confident. "Yeah, and they're not just passing through." Davies nodded. "Figures." He positioned the pry bar. "Okay, Kane, I'm going to try and lever this thing up just enough for you to ease her leg out. It's going to be unstable. You need to be quick and careful. If this shifts wrong, it could be worse. You ready?" Alex repositioned himself, his muscles screaming in protest from the awkward crouch. "Ready." This was the moment. A wave of adrenaline surged through Alex, sharpening his focus. He watched Davies strain, the muscles in his arms cording as he applied pressure to the pry bar. The slab groaned, shifted a fraction of an inch. Dust and small pebbles rained down. "Now, Kane, gently." Alex reached forward, his hand surprisingly steady. He cupped the foal's tiny, fragile leg just above and below the point of entrapment, It felt bird-like, so delicate he could feel the frantic thrum of her pulse. He eased the leg backwards as Davies grunted with effort, lifting the slab just enough. For a heart-stopping moment, it snagged. Then, with a final, careful pull, it came free. "Got it!" Alex exclaimed, cradling the leg. Davies slowly lowered the slab, which settled with a dull thud. He was breathing heavily. "All right, let's get her out of here." Getting the foal out was another challenge. She was weak, clearly in shock, and her freed leg dangled uselessly. Davies, with surprising tenderness, rigged a makeshift sling from a canvas sheet in his kit, while Alex did his best to soothe the filly, stroking her neck, murmuring soft reassurances. Stardust watched every move, her anxiety palpable. It was as they were preparing to lift the foal that the major revelation occurred, changing the complexion of the rescue. Alex, while supporting the filly, noticed something peculiar about the injured leg. The slight twist he'd observed at birth was still there, but as he gently palpated the bone, feeling for a break, he found none. Instead, just below the fetlock, almost hidden in the fine, pale hair, was a perfectly formed V-shaped marking, a tiny, darker chevron. It wasn't an injury at all, it was a congenital marking, and the leg, while perhaps slightly less robust than the others, didn't feel broken. It was the awkward way she'd been pinned that made it look so damaged. "Davies, look at this," Alex said, excitement creeping into his voice despite the situation. He pointed to the chevron. "And I don't think this leg is broken. I think it's different. Maybe a bit underdeveloped, but not snapped." Davies leaned in, squinting. "Well, I'll be a birthmark. And you're right. Doesn't feel like a clean break. Might be a ligament or just weak. Hard to tell out here." He looked from the foal to the mare, then back to Alex. "This filly, she's already a legend, and she's not even an hour old. This was the turning point. The foal wasn't just a victim of an accident. She was unique, perhaps even more so than her pale coat suggested." This realization solidified Alex's resolve. She wasn't just any foal. Her survival felt more critical, more symbolic. He was no longer just reacting to a disaster. He was actively fighting for something extraordinary. The decision that followed cemented this shift. Davies, ever the pragmatist, said, "Okay, even if the leg isn't broken, she's weak, and Mama is a wreck. Standard procedure here might be to euthanize if the foal can't keep up, or if the mare rejects it due to injury." Alex felt a cold dread. "No, we can't do that. Not yet. Not her." He looked at Stardust, who was still anxiously fixated on them. "The mare won't reject her. And this filly, she's a fighter. She survived the fall, being pinned." Davies considered him, then the foal. "It's a hard life out here, Kane. Sentiment doesn't usually factor in." "This isn't just sentiment," Alex argued, his voice gaining strength. "This is a rare bloodline. Stardust herself is an anomaly. This foal, she deserves a chance. We can get them to the old Bar M Ranch cistern. There's water there, some shelter in the old line shack. It's closer than trying to get them up and out of this canyon system immediately." Davies was quiet for a long moment. The coyotes yelped again, closer still. He looked up towards the rim of the canyon. "Those dogs are getting brave. If we stay here, we're just baiting them." He made his decision. "All right, Kane, against my better judgment, we'll try your way. But if that filly can't make it, or if the mare becomes a danger to us or herself, He left the sentence unfinished. The point of no return had been crossed. They weren't just extracting the foal from immediate danger anymore. They were committing to a difficult, uncertain journey, moving from a reactive rescue to a proactive, risky attempt to ensure survival. Alex felt a surge of grim determination. He would not let this special foal, marked by fate and earth, become another tragic statistic of the wild. He would carry her if he had to. The ascent from the fissure with the foal was agonizingly slow. Davies, with his superior strength and rope skills, took the lead, cradling the filly in the makeshift sling, while Alex scrambled ahead, clearing loose rocks and calling encouragement to Stardust, who followed their progress with intense, nervous scrutiny from above. Each dislodged pebble felt like a potential catastrophe. The foal remained unnervingly quiet, her small body limp in the sling, her pale coat now streaked with grime and a smear of blood from a scrape on her flank. Once they were back on the relatively level, though still debris-strewn, floor of the box canyon, the filly made a weak attempt to stand. Her legs trembled violently, and the different foreleg buckled almost immediately. She collapsed with a soft sigh, her head drooping. Stardust nuzzled her frantically, a low guttural moan rumbling in her chest. "She's weak, Davies, really weak," Alex said, his earlier optimism taking a hit. Shock, maybe dehydration already. Davies nodded grimly. "We need to get some fluids into her if she'll take it, and into the mare. That cistern you mentioned. Kane, how far?" "Maybe 2 miles. Over that low pass to the west," Alex estimated, pointing. "Terrain's rough, but not as bad as this canyon. If we can get Stardust to lead, the foal might rally enough to follow, even if it's slow." The first challenge was the coyotes. The pack, emboldened by the scent of blood and vulnerability, had grown bolder. 3 of them, lean and mangy, appeared at the narrow mouth of the box canyon, their yellow eyes fixed on the foal. Stardust whirled, ears pinned, teeth bared, and launched a surprisingly agile charge for a mare who had just given birth and endured an earthquake. She screamed a challenge, a sound of pure fury, and the coyotes, not expecting such a spirited defense from an apparently compromised animal, scattered momentarily. "She's magnificent," Alex breathed, a surge of admiration cutting through his worry. "She's buying us time," Davies said, already shouldering his pack. "Let's move. Kane, you try and encourage the foal. I'll watch our backs and try to keep the mare focused on moving forward, not just fighting." The next few hours became a brutal test of endurance and willpower. Alex found a collapsible water bladder and a syringe in Davies' kit. He managed to get a small amount of water into the foal's mouth, which she swallowed weakly. He then focused on her different leg, gently massaging it, trying to encourage circulation. To his immense relief, she eventually made another attempt to stand, and this time, with Alex providing a steadying hand, she managed it, albeit on wobbly legs. The marked foreleg still seemed weaker, but she could put some weight on it. The journey to the Bar M cistern was a slow, painful procession. Stardust, ever vigilant, kept glancing back at her foal, nudging her forward, then spinning to face down the shadows whenever the coyotes, who were paralleling their path, grew too bold. Davies, with a mixture of shouts and well-aimed rocks, kept the predators at a respectful distance, but their relentless presence was a heavy psychological burden. The sun climbed, beating down into the canyons, and the temperature rose. The foal, whom Alex had mentally christened Hope, stumbled frequently. Each time she fell, a wave of despair washed over Alex. He would help her up, murmuring encouragement, his own body aching, his throat parched. Stardust, too, was showing signs of exhaustion, her proud head drooping slightly, her steps less certain. She had lost blood during the birth, endured the terror of the earthquake and the entrapment of her foal, and was now fighting off predators while navigating difficult terrain. Her resilience was astounding, but Alex knew she had limits. They reached a particularly tricky section, a steep, shale-covered slope. Hope slipped, her legs splaying, and she let out a cry of frustration and pain. Stardust, hearing it, tried to turn back on the narrow path, nearly losing her own footing. It was a moment where everything could unravel. Alex felt a knot of despair tighten in his chest. This was his dark night of the soul. Maybe Davies was right. Maybe this is too much for her. Are we just prolonging her suffering? He looked at the tiny, struggling creature, her pale coat covered in dust, her eyes dull with exhaustion. He thought of the perfectly formed chevron on her leg, a mark of uniqueness in a world that prized conformity for survival. Then Davies, who had been scouting ahead, called back, "I see the cistern and the old line shack. Maybe another quarter mile. Kane, we're close." The words were a lifeline. Alex pushed his despair aside. "You hear that? Hope," he whispered, helping the filly find her feet again. "We're almost there. You can do this." He looked at Stardust, her sides heaving. "You too, Mama, just a little further." As they neared the cistern, the coyotes made one last, desperate attempt. 4 of them, slinking through the sagebrush, tried to cut off the foal from her mother, Stardust. With a reserve of strength Alex didn't know she possessed, wheeled and charged, not with a scream this time, but with a deep, guttural roar of defiance. She struck out with her front hooves, connecting with a sickening thud on the flank of the lead coyote, sending it yelping into the scrub. The others, momentarily stunned by her ferocity, hesitated. It was the opening they needed. "Now," shouted Davies, and together they urged the mare and foal the last few hundred yards towards the dilapidated stone walls of the old cistern and the relative safety of the 3-sided line shack beside it. The remaining coyotes, seeing their quarry reach a more defensible position, finally seemed to melt back into the landscape, though Alex knew they wouldn't go far. The final preparation for whatever came next was simply to reach this small island of potential safety, to rest, and to face the decisions the night would bring. The line shack was little more than a ruin, 3 crumbling stone walls and a partially collapsed roof. But it offered a windbreak and a sense of enclosure. The cistern, miraculously, still held a shallow pool of murky water. While Davies set about securing the open side of the shack with some fallen branches and his emergency blanket to create a more defensible barrier, Alex focused on Stardust and Hope. The mare drank deeply from the cistern, then turned her attention to her foal, nudging her gently towards the water. Hope, after a few hesitant sips, began to drink with more enthusiasm. Her earlier lethargy seemed to be receding, replaced by a bone-deep weariness Alex shared. As dusk began to settle, painting the canyon walls in shades of purple and blood orange, the coyotes returned. Their howls echoed through the twilight. Closer this time, a tightening noose of sound. Inside the makeshift shelter, Stardust grew agitated, pacing the small space, her ears constantly swiveling. Hope, nestled against her mother's side, trembled. "They'll try us tonight," Davies said quietly, checking the makeshift barrier. "They know the foal is weak, and the mare's tired." He had a powerful flashlight, but its beam would only do so much against a determined pack. He also had a flare gun, a last resort. Alex felt a cold dread. They were cornered. He had pushed for this chance, and now it seemed he might have led them into a death trap. The central question loomed: had he saved Hope only for her to be torn apart by predators? The first probe came just after full dark. A shadowy form darted towards the opening, testing their defenses. Stardust lunged, teeth bared, and the shadow retreated. But soon there were more, fleeting glimpses of eyes glowing in the darkness just beyond the feeble reach of their small, battery-powered lantern. Then the attack began in earnest. 3 coyotes rushed the barrier simultaneously. Davies yelled, kicking out at the canvas, while Stardust, in a display of incredible courage, met them head-on at the opening, rearing and striking, her powerful hooves a blur. One coyote, yelping in pain, was thrown back, but another slipped past her, darting towards the foal. Hope, startled, tried to scramble away, her weak leg giving way. Alex, reacting purely on instinct, threw himself between the coyote and the foal. He felt a searing pain in his forearm as teeth grazed him, but he kicked out, connecting with the predator's ribs. The coyote yelped, momentarily deterred, but circled, looking for another opening. Stardust, seeing her foal directly threatened, became a whirlwind of fury. She spun, lashing out with her hind legs, driving the coyote that had attacked Alex back towards the barrier, where Davies managed to land a solid blow with a stout piece of wood he'd found. The fight was desperate, chaotic, illuminated by the erratic beam of Davies' flashlight. Alex, his arm bleeding, scrambled to stay beside Hope, shielding her small body with his own. He could hear the snap of teeth, the guttural snarls of the coyotes, Stardust's furious screams, Davies' shouts. It felt like an eternity, but it could only have been minutes. Then Davies yelled, "Kane, the flare!" Alex fumbled for the flare gun, his hand slick with a mixture of his own blood and grime. He aimed it toward the sky, away from the rock walls, and pulled the trigger. With a whoosh and a crackle, a brilliant red flare shot upwards, bathing the entire scene in an eerie, dancing light. The sudden, intense illumination and the loud noise had a startling effect on the coyotes. They froze, confused and momentarily blinded. Stardust, taking advantage of their hesitation, launched one final, desperate charge, scattering them. The red light burned, casting long, terrifying shadows, and then, as quickly as it had begun, the assault was over. The coyotes, unnerved by the flare and the ferocity of the defense, melted back into the darkness, their howls receding into the distance. Silence, heavy and ringing, descended upon the small, battered shelter. In the crimson afterglow of the flare, Alex slowly sat up, his body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. His arm throbbed, but he barely noticed. Hope was safe, nuzzled tightly against Stardust, who stood panting, her flanks lathered in sweat, but unbroken. Davies sagged against the stone wall, equally spent. "Well, Kane," Davies said, his voice raspy, "you wanted to give her a chance. Looks like she took it." There was a grudging respect in his tone that hadn't been there before. They kept watch for the rest of the night, but the coyotes did not return. As dawn approached, casting a soft, forgiving light over the ravaged landscape, a sense of weary triumph settled over them. Hope, remarkably, was on her feet, even taking a few tentative steps on her unique foreleg, which, while still weaker, seemed to trouble her less than before. Stardust, ever watchful, began to graze on some sparse tufts of grass near the cistern, her gaze frequently returning to her foal. Later that morning, using Davies's satellite phone, they arranged for a BLM support team, not to capture them, but to bring supplemental feed for Stardust and to have a veterinarian discreetly assess Hope from a distance. Alex, his arm bandaged, insisted he would stay to monitor them for a few more days. Davies, surprisingly, agreed to help coordinate the support, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary circumstances. The veterinarian's initial assessment, observed through binoculars, was cautiously optimistic. Hope's leg was indeed a congenital defect, a slight malformation of the lower bone, but not one that seemed to be causing acute pain or would necessarily prevent her from living a wild life, especially with a mother as fiercely protective as Stardust. Her pale coat and unique V-shaped marking on that very leg made her an instant quiet legend among the local BLM staff and conservationists Alex later spoke to. In the weeks that followed, Alex, from a respectful distance, watched Hope grow. She was indeed a fighter. Her initial frailty gave way to a surprising resilience. She learned to compensate for her weaker leg, developing a slightly unconventional but effective gait. Stardust remained fiercely devoted, guiding her foal through the rugged terrain, teaching her the ways of the wild. The earthquake and its aftermath had changed the landscape, but it had also forged new bonds. Alex's relationship with Ranger Davies shifted from wary acquaintance to one of mutual respect. His own role as an observer had been irrevocably altered. He knew he could no longer be purely passive when faced with such profound need, though he also understood the delicate balance of intervention. The new normal for Stardust and Hope was one of watchful peace. They became a symbol in the region, the pale filly with the chevron mark, a testament to survival against incredible odds, and the dusky mare, the embodiment of maternal devotion. Alex continued his work, his photographs now imbued with a deeper understanding of the fragility and tenacity of life. Sometimes, in the quiet of the desert, he would see them, a flash of pale cream against the red rocks, a mother and her special foal, thriving, and he would remember the terror of the earth tearing apart, the desperation in the lion shack, and the astonishing, enduring power of hope, born in the heart of a wild Mustang. The shock of that day had given way to a profound sense of wonder.